The other thing that becomes really important is setting up the environment to be what's called a prepared environment. So things like signage becomes important. How can I get a cup of coffee if I don't know where the cups are? Just recently I was in somebody's home and a lady who is living with dementia, and when I said to her how was she said, "Oh, I'm all right," she said, "but I'm a bit upset." And I said, "Why are you upset?" And she said, "Well, I can't find my toaster." And I said, "You can't find your toaster?" She said, "Yes, I thought that I had a toaster, but I can't find it. I've always had a piece of toast for lunch." So I said, "Well, let's see if we can find your toaster." So I went through the cupboards, and there in the cupboard where the toaster had lived for 15 years was a toaster. And that's a good example where if that cupboard had been signed with what's in the cupboard, that situation wouldn't have transpired. So, for families, it's about the prepared environment might be putting signage up. It might be putting task breakdown in the kitchen, how to make a cup of tea. And of course, we've used that for particularly people who live by themselves, how important is it for people to have their morning cuppa? But if they've forgotten the steps involved, then what happens is that they either forget to put the milk in, or they get cold water, or they forget to, put the tea in the teapot. And so we can use task breakdown so that on their kitchen wall they follow a series of pictures and words of how to make a cup of tea. So, families are going to see that perhaps that might be an appropriate strategy for their person. There is no one magic fit for everybody. And that's the beauty of working in a Montessori way, is having staff who will always look at the person, their environment, their family support, and what is needed to enable the person to be the best that they can be. And certainly, by using task breakdown, we can enable people to dress themselves again by following a task breakdown on the front of their wardrobe door and how the process and how to get dressed. Often what can happen with people, for people living with dementia, is that they lose sequencing. So they can get themselves dressed and all the items of clothing are on in the right way, but it's a sequencing that becomes faulty. So, for example, you will get people living with dementia who will get themselves dressed beautifully with all their articles of clothing on, but they've got their underpants over their trousers instead of under their trousers, or they've got their singlet on over the top of their shirt instead of under their shirt. And so what can happen in traditional models of support is that we say, "Oh my goodness, this person needs to be dressed now because they're unable to dress themselves." In a Montessori environment, we would say, okay, this person needs to be able to use a task breakdown, and you teach the person to use it so that you give them a sequence in which they get dressed.